You're listening to Shalom Greater Raleigh, a production of the Jewish Federation of Greater Raleigh. I'm your host, B.J. Davis. Welcome to the first episode of Shalom Greater Raleigh. Beginning with this episode, and in other episodes to follow, you'll hear directly from the people behind the Federation's programs, services, and initiatives. In this first episode, we'll focus on the history of Jewish Raleigh, hear what it was like to grow up Jewish in the area, and find out how the Federation helps those who have recently moved to the area or are interested in moving. First, we'll talk with Barbara Freedman, a librarian and historian who's been a resident of Raleigh since 1978. We'll discuss the first Jews to locate to the Raleigh area and the early development of its Jewish community. Hi, I'm here with Barbara Freedman. We're going to talk about local Jewish history. So, Barbara, what first got you started and interested in local Jewish history?
Well, I've always been interested in local history. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I think when you grow up in a city with a great colonial history like Philadelphia, and you can actually go to the places where people worshiped and lived and shopped, it makes it come alive. So I've always been interested in local history. And when we first moved to North Carolina, we were in Durham. And I thought to myself, how did these people get here? Why are they here? You know, when you're from a big northeastern city, you think people only came to the Northeast. And so I started learning a little bit about Durham Jewish history. And then we moved to Raleigh in 1978. So I've been studying it since. And I'm on the board of the Raleigh Hebrew Cemetery, which gives me a lot of time to think about our predecessors here in Raleigh.
We're going to get around to the issue of the cemeteries, the Jewish cemeteries, in a little bit. But I understand that the first Jewish family or families arrived in Raleigh in the early 1800s. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about who they were, what brought them here, and then what led to the larger waves of mostly European Jewish immigrants to coming to the area.
The first Jewish person that we're aware of that lived in Raleigh was Moses Mordecai, and he came here just after 1800. His family had been running a school for girls in Warrenton, North Carolina. And believe it or not, Warrenton, which today is a very small town, was a big commercial center for tobacco plantations. And the girls there needed a place to go to school. So Jacob Mordecai, Moses' father, opened a school. And the girls lived at the school, and everybody in the family had some responsibility. Moses was the oldest child, and my guess is that he could not wait to get out of that situation, living and working in a girls' school, but that's just my guess. He came to Raleigh and he read the law with a lawyer who was already here, and that was how you essentially went to law school in those days, and he was admitted to the bar. And he began a very successful law practice, and he even held some official positions with the state, which technically I think were probably not available to Jews, but somehow he was in those spots. And he married into a very prominent non-Jewish family in Raleigh. That family was the Lane family. They had been here already for many, many years. And of course, Moses's children were not considered Jewish. Moses had many siblings. Only one or two came to Raleigh. The rest scattered to other slightly larger places, Richmond, Savannah, even Galveston, New Orleans area. And the Mordecai family is large and well known. It sounds like it might be a Sephardic name, but it's not. The Mordecai family came from Germany, but they were among the earliest Jewish immigrants from one of the German states.
Did they change the way they pronounced their name to try to fit into Protestant or society a little bit more?
There are lots of members of the Mordecai family today who live in Raleigh, and they tell me that the pronunciation of the name was changed so that it would sound less Jewish. In other words, from Mordecai, or Mordechai, as we might say it, to Mordecai. Well, that doesn't fool me. It doesn't fool you. And I don't know how successful that change was, but it doesn't seem to have stopped the Mordecai family in remaining prominent in the city.
So that was just after 1800. And then at what point did the early waves of German Jewish immigrants or other immigrants start to come into North Carolina, into the Raleigh area?
In about 1862, at the beginning of the Civil War, a man named Michael Grousman, who, believe it or not, was also in Warrenton, came to Raleigh. He wanted to enlist in the Confederate Army, but he was considered too short. And instead, he was issued a license to sell uniforms to the Southern Army. And so he was in Raleigh with his family, basically in commercial business. And there were probably a half a dozen families at that time. And they stayed here. At the end of the Civil War, they established businesses here. And Michael Grousman lived until about 1890. And my guess is there might have been 35 Jewish families at that time. Grousman was pretty well educated in Jewish stuff, and he was able to read the Torah, and he was able to talk a little bit about the Talmud. And groups met for prayer in people's homes or in their businesses. As far as I know, they never really established a congregation. In 1867, because there was a death in the community, they had to establish a cemetery. There had not been a Jewish cemetery before that. In the late 1890s, early 20th century, before 1905, the Jewish community shrank a little bit. People went to bigger cities. The community didn't grow. But then in 1905, when the pogroms in the Pale of Settlement got really bad, waves of immigrants started coming. And they were mostly from the Pale of Settlement. So they would be Polish, Belarusian, Ukrainian, and Galician. And they really started coming in after 1905. And I think a lot of the people who came to Raleigh came initially as peddlers. Many of them came into Baltimore, some into New York, but more into Baltimore. And there were ways that they could obtain packs of goods to sell. And they would set out from Baltimore. And when they found a place they liked, they would stop and they would settle there and they would establish stores.
When was the beginning of a real, I would say, some momentum in the Jewish community?
Well, I think buying that piece of land inside Oakwood Cemetery in 1867, there was a group of men who got together and did that. So I think that was one indication that there was a community. And they went to George Washington Mordecai, who was a much younger half brother of Moses, to ask if they could buy land at Oakwood Cemetery. And everyone sort of assumes that George Washington Mordecai understood the connection between his family and the Jewish community. And they did buy a small piece of land. Then I would say the meetings that went on in people's homes and in people's businesses indicate that there was enough of a group that they could begin activities together. Something happened in 1912, and I'm not sure what it is about 1912, but 1912 is a year when the Jewish community decided that we needed our own cemetery, not a cemetery inside Oakwood Cemetery. And in 1912 through 1914, a group of men purchased what is our current Raleigh Hebrew Cemetery on North State Street. And the names of those people are on the plaque at the entrance to the cemetery. So that's a big task. They bought a piece of land and they did the fundraising to pay for that piece of land. And the fundraising was that families in Raleigh bought family plots. And even today, we are still burying people in those family plots. So it's been over 100 years. Of course, the cemetery has expanded twice. Also in 1912, whatever congregation there was, and there was a congregation, and I'm not even sure what its name was. In 1912, there was a disagreement, I guess, over the religious education of boys. One group wanted boys to go to school 3 or 4 days a week after school for their pre-bar mitzvah training. Another group said, that's just too much. We just can't do that. And so we're going to have 2 days. And so there was a split in the congregation. And the more traditional group, which called itself the House of Jacob, moved to a building at the corner of New Bern Avenue and East Street. And the rabbi lived in that house, and the congregation met in that house for many years after that. So that was the House of Jacob. The less traditional group established itself just for a short time. It was called the Raleigh Hebrew Congregation, but within a year it became Temple Beth Or. And they met on the second floor of what is today City Restaurant. It was Rosenthal's Grocery at that time, and then it became the Heilig Levine Furniture Store. And they were there until 1924. So there was this split. On the other hand, there was a Young Men's Hebrew Association. A lot of the men were members of a Masonic lodge here in Raleigh. And if you look at some of our tombstones, you can see the Masonic emblem on the tombstone. I think that might have been the only civic group that Jews were admitted to. Nobody's ever said that to me, but I've looked at lots of lists of people who were in other civic groups, and I don't see any Jewish names. So I'm thinking the Masons may have been the only one.
So you mentioned that the early congregation that became Beth Or met above the restaurant on Fayetteville Street that's currently the City Mediterranean Restaurant. I don't think most people understand that the Jewish community early on was based in and around the downtown, the capital area. There were a lot of Jewish families that lived in the Oakview area, and a lot of businesses up and down Wilmington and Fayetteville Street. Could you talk a little bit about how that happened and some of the key businesses that got established there?
Sure. I'm not exactly sure how they ended up in this area, but you're right. Fayetteville Street and Wilmington Street had lots of Jewish businesses. G&S Department Store, Ellisburg's Ladies Wear, Adler's Shoes, Goodman's, which was a ladies' clothing store, so many of them. And if you were walking downtown, if you were walking to work, you would see all these Jewish businesses. And a lot of people lived in Oakwood, which today we probably are too lazy to walk home and walk to work, but it's very possible to do it. East Lane Street had so many Jews on it at one time that the community called it the Russian Front, because there were so many Jewish people who lived on that street. And the House of Jacob was in that same area. So if you formed a triangle from Wilmington and Fayetteville Streets to House of Jacob and to the cemetery, it was a very walkable area. Beth Or, after they moved out of the Wilmington Street location city, moved to Hillsborough Street. They were in a building that is next to today's Char Grill. It was rough, I understand, on Yom Kippur to smell those hamburgers cooking. But a lot of Beth Or people lived in Boylan Heights, which is often called Raleigh's first suburb. And it was considered very far out of town to live in Boylan Heights. And there was a trolley on Hillsborough Street at that point and Glenwood Avenue, where you could actually get a little distance. There was a dairy called Kaplan's Dairy. Kaplan's Dairy address was 1200 West Lenore Street. We don't think of that as being very far out today, but actually the state fairgrounds were the next stop after 1200 West Lenore Street. But that was Kaplan's Dairy. So yeah, downtown was definitely the hub of life, both Jewish life and business life.
So when did the children of local Jewish families start to attend colleges and universities?
Well, it's interesting. I have a great picture of Isaac Schwartz from the 1918 UNC yearbook. He was a sophomore, I think, in 1918. And one of his classmates or schoolmates at UNC at that time was a guy named Ernest Neiman. And eventually, Ernest Neiman married Ike Schwartz's sister, Fanny. And they were all living here when I first moved to Raleigh. So, as far as going to UNC and to NC State, I would say pretty early there were Jewish students. And there was even, I think, in Ike's picture, yearbook picture, it says that he's a member of now I can't remember whether it's called the Menorah Club or the Shalom Club or something that indicates there was an on-campus Jewish organization in 1918, which is astounding to me. As far as the women, I have to say about the women, I don't know when. I mean, generally women started going to college later than that, but I know that there were several members of the Jewish community, women who went to Meredith. And I think part of the reason for that is that they could live at home if they went to Meredith. And if their families were like mine, they wouldn't have wanted them to go live in a dormitory. So Meredith, in spite of the fact that it was a church-related organization, was where a couple of them went.
Are there any aspects of Jewish life in the greater Raleigh area or in North Carolina in particular that you feel are unique or distinctive other than being what, quote unquote, Southern Jewish families?
We used to have the Blumenthal Jewish home outside of Winston-Salem. And the Blumenthal Jewish home was created through the philanthropy of the Blumenthal family, but also through the volunteerism of the North Carolina Association of Jewish Men and the North Carolina Association of Jewish Women, which I don't think exist anymore. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's unusual to have a statewide organization do something like that. And I think that's really neat. However, you know what happens when you have something like the Blumenthal Jewish home, the whole care for the elderly economy changed so dramatically with Medicare and with other things that eventually the facility was sold. There's still a lot of activity assisting seniors, but it's not through an institution like the Blumenthal Jewish home was.
And of course, in the early 20th century, the Jewish community was mostly made up of merchants and store owners. And then later, I think as, the children of these families that moved to the area went to college, they probably took on more professional roles. And then also in the 1960s, when Research Triangle got established, and with that explosion, of course, now there's a lot of high tech and technical engineering and
right. But I think the 1960s, when Research Triangle Park started and got big, really marked a turning point, because up until then it had been merchants, it had been family businesses, and we didn't have tobacco, and we didn't have textiles, we didn't have furniture, which in some ways were good because we didn't lose them like some of the cities lost their primary businesses. And in the 60s, IBM came, Burroughs Wellcome came, Becton Dickinson, Monsanto. And I know I worked for Burroughs Wellcome, and our research people, when they moved down here from Westchester County, New York, lived in Chapel Hill. And the business people moved to Cary. And the children who didn't have kids moved to Durham, because Durham schools were questionable at that time. And that just caused tremendous change. The congregations grew, the level of activity grew. And I just think that really energized the Jewish community here. It changed some things. Maybe not everybody thinks it was for the better, but we've just had this tremendous growth. And I think that it's the Research Triangle that's responsible for it.
Well, you mentioned the congregations and the fact that we've got Yavna, Beth Or, Beth Meyer, Sharei Israel, Beth Shalom in Cary, Chabad in Cary. It's really grown quite a bit.
It's kind of amazing.
But anyway, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. I hope
Welcome.
it was relatively painless.
Yes. And do you want me to talk about the new cemetery?
Yes.
We will be sold out in about a year. I mean, there are lots of plots that are sold that haven't been used yet, but we will be sold out by the end of 2023. And we are working with Raleigh Memorial Park, which is on Glenwood Avenue, to start a Jewish section at Raleigh Memorial Park. And they are very anxious to do it and are working with us very closely. And it'll be closer to North Raleigh, closer to Durham, closer to Western Wake, where there's such tremendous growth. And I think it will be a very good thing to do. But we will still always have our North State Street Cemetery and our small cemetery inside Oakwood Historic Park.
Yes, it is very small. It just has like a little chain around it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was really wonderful.
Oh, great. I'm glad to meet you.
In case you're wondering what it's like to grow up Jewish in the Greater Raleigh area, our next guest is Jamie Eliahu. Jamie grew up in Raleigh, is a past president of the Federation, and has personally observed the amazing transformation of the area's Jewish community. And I'm here today with Jamie Eliahu. She is the immediate past president of the Federation, the board of the Federation. She's a Raleigh native. So, Jamie, welcome to the podcast. Could you discuss being a Raleigh native, what your memories are in terms of growing up in the Raleigh area, your involvement, if any, in the Jewish community, and talk a little bit about what things were like when you were growing up and what things are like today?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. So my father's family, came to Raleigh from Durham in 1957. My dad is actually from Durham, and my grandfather was born in Birmingham, Alabama. So my family on my father's side has deep roots in the South. My grandma was from New Jersey, but my grandfather was from the South, and they moved to Durham when they got married. I grew up here, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. I think it gave me a very strong Jewish identity. You know, when I was growing up, we knew all the Jews. We knew all the Jews in Raleigh. We knew the Jews. You know, if I was anywhere and I said my last name, which was Rose, you know, people knew my grandparents, people knew my parents, and my grandparents all were in furniture and had furniture stores. So, you know, when people would move to the area back then, they would come buy furniture from my parents or my grandparents. So it was a great way to meet people. And it was the first kind of stop for some of the Jews in the area too, after they, you know, found their houses. When I was growing up, we lived in North Raleigh. I live in North Raleigh today. And I would say that I lived in an area that, for back then, had a very high concentration of Jewish families. There were maybe 3 or 4 Jews on my street. It used to be called Bagel Boulevard. So, you know, that was a lot of families at the time. We didn't have a ton of Jewish kids in our classes. You know, if I ever had one Jewish person in my class, it was like, oh my goodness, there's other Jews here, you know, with me.
You were talking about in public school, right?
Yes. We had to teach people about what it meant to be Jewish and what being Jewish was. I actually did go to the Hillel school at Shari Israel through first grade. So I didn't go to public school until second grade. So I had a pretty strong foundation of Hebrew and Jewish learning before I went to public school, but there weren't enough kids to have Jewish elementary school. So once I was through first grade, my parents put me in public school, and I went to public school throughout the rest of my education here. Growing up, we had Hebrew school Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sunday. Today it's a little bit different. But my close friends, interestingly, from preschool are many of my closest friends today. And a lot of us left the area for what we may have thought were greener pastures. A lot of us went to, higher population Jewish areas and then came back. So Raleigh is a great place to live, and it was a great place to live when I was growing up, but I always wanted to be in a place with more Jews. I wanted to feel like I was part of a larger community that I didn't feel existed here. Little did I know that Raleigh was going to change as much as it has over the last, 20 years, 5 years, 1 year. I mean, there's constantly new percentages of how many people are moving here, and we're the fourth, highest movement of population into a state, I think, in the country right now. So, we just keep kind of moving up the ladder there. We didn't have USY until I was in high school. And we had Kadima. We started Kadima also when I was in middle school. So we were kind of the first group of that. BBYO was always pretty popular in the area. So I was part of BBYO and Kadima and USY, and eventually became president of USY when I was in high school. So I always kind of was involved in the Jewish community growing up. And then, in college, I went to Syracuse. So the Jewish population is very high, probably around 30%. And, most of my friends in college were Jewish, and I had never experienced that before. And then, I moved to New York, the city, and again, everyone was Jewish. So, it was good to experience that and then to come back to Raleigh. But one thing that people ask me often about being Jewish here is, are you ever afraid to show your Jewishness? Or, do people ever ask you questions that are inappropriate? And what I always have told people, and what I thought growing up, and what I still think now for the most part, is that we have a lot of religious people in this area, religiously Christian, and a lot of those people just want to understand. They just want to be educated. So, when they ask questions, you just have to give them what the answer is, and they'll embrace that and embrace you for whatever it is that you believe in.
It obviously sounds like you had a very varied and involved relationship with the Jewish community growing up here, and then also when you left. So you moved back, and then at some point you get involved in the Federation and you end up on the board, and then eventually become its president. What were some of the things that led you to get involved with the Federation, and what were some of your ideas or hopes or aspirations for how the Federation could enhance Jewish life here in the Wake County?
So I moved back to Raleigh 11 years ago. And when I moved back to Raleigh, I was 7 months pregnant with my older son, who is now 11. And I was still working for my job in New York until I had my son. So I was working remotely, and I didn't see people outside of my house. And once I had my son, who was extremely colicky and just kind of a nightmare baby, I was trying to find people to be with. I couldn't just be by myself with a crying baby. So I literally went to every mommy and me that existed within the Jewish community in Raleigh. I went to story time at the library. I went to Gymboree, and I just tried to fill my time with being with other moms with babies and trying to get my baby to not cry all the time. And I was meeting a lot of Jewish women, for the most part, and their babies and younger children. And because I was from here, And I knew people who were here already. And because I was meeting all of these new people, I started to think like it would be great if we could do more together and not just go to mommy and me on a Wednesday morning. So I called the JCC. At the time, there was a group called Raleigh Tribe that was geared towards young professionals. And I was like, well, can we do something similar, but for young families with young children? I knew that there was PJ Library, but we did not have that here at the time. So when I called the JCC, they said, we would love to do something like that, but we don't have staff to run that program. You want to volunteer to help lead it? And so I said, sure. So with the help of one of the staff members, we created a pool party and barbecue at the JCC. And I think we had 30 families come to that first event. And after that, we just kind of did monthly events. We would have playground play dates. We had Shabbat and Havdalah at the JCC. We would just kind of do different things. And then probably a year into doing that, I got a call from Barry Schwartz, who was the head of the Federation at the time. His niece and I were in preschool together and grew up together and were, very close friends. So when I moved back and I was, already involved, he called me and we met for coffee and he said, we would love to have someone like you on the Federation board. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And I was like 30 or 31 years old. I really was clueless about what that meant for me. I really had no idea what I would be getting into. He handed me a piece of paper that had, lists of what the Federation board does and what the Federation does. And I said I would talk to my husband about it. And we talked about it. And I really like to be involved. And I'm the type of person that if I feel like something isn't the way that I think it should be, I try to work with people to make it work best for what I think would help not just me, but a community of people. So I decided to join the board. And when I joined the board, I think there were 3 or 4 women, and I was the second to youngest. It was a lot of in their 50s plus. So that was a very different thing to be a part of. Once I joined the board, I'm an introvert, so I was quiet and kind of observing what was happening. I just was a board member. I would go to meetings and, continue to plan my young Jewish families events. And then 5 or 6 years ago, Rob Hubble was going to be president again. He was president when I first joined the board. And he needed a first vice president. So he came and said, I think you would be a great first vice president. Would you be interested? So again, I had to think about that, and I agreed to do it. So I was the first vice president for 2 years and then became the president after that. So when I became the president, I was the 3rd woman, and I'm pretty sure, the youngest president that we've ever had. The 2 women before me, Carol Gould and Eileen Schwartz, there are honorary trustees still today. They're these women that anyone would want to look up to within the Jewish community. So, I feel honored that I was able to follow in their footsteps. When I joined the board as president and vice president, I'm a connector, and that was always what I wanted to do. That was why I created Young Jewish Families, and that was why I wanted to be more involved within the Federation and the JCC. So, my big goal was to connect the community. And that's what I wanted to see 10 years ago. That's what I want to see now, and that's what I want to continue in the future. There's a lot of issues that the Federation deals with on a daily basis, whether it is around Israel, helping people in need, through JFS, doing our summer camp. And those are all things that I feel very passionate about being a part of helping and to move forward. So today we have PJ Library in this area, and we've had it for several years. I'm not sure exactly how many, but the Young Jewish Families events that were planned before we had PJ Library, we didn't have the funds at that time to have PJ Library. And today we have several donors who've helped us to be able to have that program. And we have lots of children who are enjoying the benefits of that with programming and those kinds of things. So it's good to see things move forward over time as well.
What were some of the specific priorities that you set or that you had in your head when you became president? And of those priorities, what do you think you made the most progress with?
So that's a very interesting question, because I became president in October of 2019. In September of 2019, we opened the pavilion on our David R. Kahn community campus. So we had a very large event with a lot of people. I think there were over 1,000 people that day on the campus. And it was very exciting for the community to kind of start this new phase of our JCC. And then we had all of these programs planned, lots of things, to be happening on the campus, and COVID hit in March. We actually had a board meeting the Wednesday night, I think it was like March 12th or something, and we were discussing what we were going to do if we had to shut down. And it was either the next day or the day after that literally everything shut down. So my priorities and my goals definitely shifted, because a lot of the things that were my goals, revolved around people coming together. Once we shut down, no one knew what to do. We put together a medical task force, and we worked together with the Federation along with the synagogues, trying to figure out, what we should do, different steps and everything. So a lot of the things that I wanted to do kind of got pushed totally aside to just kind of stay afloat during COVID. We had to do a lot of brainstorming on how we could fundraise. And, one of my goals, our annual campaign was in the 500,000 at that point when I became president. So, of course, I wanted to increase our annual campaign. I knew that we could. But how do you do that when you can't do anything in person? So we did some virtual fundraisers. We had a concert virtually. I was doing weekly Shabbat messages, virtual Shabbat messages. I mean, we were just trying to come up with anything that we could to engage the community. And, people were going through a lot. So we were trying to, be there for people as well. We also, when I became president, did not have an executive director. So a lot of the things that I also wanted to do revolved around the structure of the organization within the professional staff. So there was a lot of time where I was sort of leading the entire organization, both from a volunteer perspective as well as helping the day-to-day run. That is not typical, I don't think, for what a president normally would be doing, but we didn't have a choice at the time. So during the time that I was president, though, we were able to come together and reorganize the organization, even during COVID, and we hired an executive director. So I would say hiring an executive director who's now been here for 2 years and continuing to move the organization forward was probably the biggest part of the success of what we did while I was president.
I wanted to also ask you about the Triangle Jewish Connection, and you also have a Facebook group that is focused on local Jewish moms. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about those and kind of what those are and how people might be able to find out more about them.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I like to connect with people, and I was one of the first 60 women in the regular, just plain Raleigh Moms group on Facebook. It was back when groups, had just started, and I was a new mom, and one of my friends added me to that group. So that was 11 years ago. And that group started to get a little bit crazy, as sometimes Facebook groups get. And I was talking to one of my oldest friends who, I grew up with in Raleigh, who also, left and came back. And I was, we were talking about it, and I was like, we should create a group for Jewish moms. Like, why not? So we started Raleigh Jewish Moms. That was our first group. And I don't know the exact number of people in that group now. I want to say maybe around 1,800. So when we first created the group, immediately it was like full of people. And once that group was going for a little bit, we wanted to have something that was, more widely focused, not just for moms. So we started Triangle Jewish Connection. There are several offshoots of both groups. Different people have created some other groups. There's a group for full-time working moms. There's a social group. So, those are run by myself and my friend. And what comes out of those groups, a lot of times, is grassroots things that do help the Federation or other Jewish organizations. Because people really, voice their opinions and concerns. There's been a lot of things that people have posted in there when they don't know where to go, and they're dealing with some sort of anti-Semitic incident, or, they're dealing with something, their child's teacher said something that maybe wasn't exactly correct, or their child is trying to figure out how to live Jewishly in Raleigh. And people are very willing to give their perspective and help out. But, a lot of times people are posting about things that have happened, with anti-Semitism. And, immediately now people say, contact Judah Siegel with JCRC. There was a little while where no one really would know, what to say. But now things have happened so much that people know. And I think, not that I want people to know where to go exactly when they're dealing with anti-Semitism, but the fact that they know that Federation can help them is what I think is really important.
Well, Jamie Eliahu, I think that's a great place to end, and I can't thank you enough for taking time and speaking with me today.
Thank you.
Our last guest is Leslie Needham. Leslie is the Membership and Engagement Manager of the Jewish Community Center's David R. Kahn Community Campus and an enthusiastic and passionate proponent of the Greater Raleigh Jewish community. I'm here with Leslie Needham, the Membership and Engagement Manager at the Raleigh-Cary JCC, the David R. Kahn Community Campus. Leslie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start off by asking you about your background, when you came to Raleigh, and how you landed at the Federation and working at the JCC.
I came to Raleigh in 2016, and JCC work is all I know. I did it in Virginia, where I came from, and when I came here, I wasn't sure if I was going to work or not, and I spent 6 months thinking about it and got bored and came to talk to Beth Richmond, who is the COO, and I think I just basically never left. I was first offered a couple of hours a day to answer the phone, and I think that lasted maybe 2 or 3 days. And then as nonprofit, that world grabs you in. I moved to different positions, did some programming, and now I'm doing the membership, and I love it. And I feel like, first of all, my love for the JCC is, and the Jewish community is huge, but also engagement. And they're both very, very important to me, because engagement, I never knew how important it was to feel accepted in a new community, because I had lived my whole life in the same Jewish community. And then after moving here 6-7 years ago, I felt I could really relate to everybody who was moving here, which is basically everyone. No one is from here. No one, everybody came from somewhere else, and we're all trying to start a new life. And so I got very excited about the prospect of being able to help people.
Your title is Membership and Engagement Manager. What does engagement mean to you professionally and personally? What does it take to engage someone? And what are some of the things that people are looking for when they move to the Raleigh area, especially if they're looking for a Jewish community?
Well, engagement to me is to bring people into the fold, really, there's so many different levels. There are people who come here and they came from a big Jewish community and they want to get involved and they want to volunteer. There are people that came here from, we have people that came here from South Africa. We have people come here from Canada, a large number from Canada recently. Most of the people that I meet come from either the Northeast or California. People say that, they can't retire out there, or it's too expensive to raise a family. So a lot of people just look on a map and say, oh, well, Raleigh ticks all the boxes. A good number come because they came to be with grandchildren, or young families come to be with siblings, or, everybody has a job, everybody has a different story. So they're all looking for different things. I've found my friends actually through engagement, because some people will come here looking for friends and we hit it off, and I've got a great group. And then sometimes I have to step back because it's getting a little crazy. But I think engagement to me coming here was feeling that I was part of the community. And as part of the community, I felt like it was home. And I do tell people, give it 3 years. 3 years is what it really takes. When I walked through Costco and someone said, "Hey, Leslie," from the Jewish community, I'm like, I'm here, I'm home, I made it. Now I'm here. But it does take a while, and you do feel, like running home every weekend to where you were from, or, oh, they did it differently where I came from, or whatever. But people here are so warm and welcoming. And the people that come here are very, looking for that. And they've been warm and wonderful. I do feel personally that I've really been able to help people. And even if it's getting them a realtor, or getting them someone to help them with insurance issues, or whatever, they need, or I need a lot of people for coffee, just, to make them feel comfortable. So this community has so much to offer. It's amazing. And it's easy to get engaged, but you have to want to.
So following up on that, I know that you do a monthly newcomer program, and you also host some social events at the Con campus. What are those programs? How do people find out about them? What are some of the offerings where people, if they want to get engaged, that they have the opportunity to do so?
Well, the newcomers, it's not every month. There are a few big events during the year, and then in between I do a coffee, just if people want to come here and meet as a group. Otherwise, on our website is a form you can fill out if you're new to the area. I get those directly, and then I contact people immediately. I'd love to meet you for coffee, or if you want to come to the J and take a tour. And then I keep a list of all those people. Then there are people who just call randomly. So we keep, their names. So as I get a list of people coming, and it's hundreds. It's really a lot of people coming throughout the year at all times. So I contact everyone on that list for every event. And so, I get a certain number. We try to move different areas. We did a wine shop in Cary. We did a community farm in downtown Raleigh, or we've done, different in North Hills. Just, I try to move around to get different people to be able to come. And then the coffees are in the morning for people who don't like to drive at night. People just say, oh, my neighbor is new and they've just moved here and they're Jewish, or, so wherever I can get names, I get names. And it's wonderful because I can follow so many of these people either join the J or join women's philanthropy or join, in some regard. And so then they become involved and part of the community.
So there are lunches, there's mahjong. Can you talk about,
There's
some of
book
the
club,
other programs?
right? There are things, J Sports has chair yoga. There's different levels for all different ages. So if an older adult, there's the speaker lunch, there's the book club, and that doesn't have to be older. That's just, adult. There, like I said, book club, speaker lunch, chair mahjong. There's pickleball, which is extremely popular. That has blown up, and that's been great. We have leagues, we have lessons. He just did an open house, and 60 people came. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. And we have women over 70 wanting to have lunch. There's so many things going on. We're starting up again, probably with the Jewish movie soon. And today we were just talking about having a craft, kibitz and craft, just come and work on your, whatever craft you have. And then for the kids, the camp is phenomenal here. It is such a wonderful camp. And it's a true Jewish camp, Jewish day camp. And that runs for 8 weeks in the summer, from June to August. And then whenever there's a day out from school, a teacher's day, they do teacher workday camps here. It's school's out, Jay's in. And that's popular, very popular.
I was hoping that hopefully when people are either interested in moving to the Raleigh area, or even once they move here and they want to find out more, the first thing that they should do is go to the Federation website.
Yes.
At shalomraleigh.org. And then they can find out more about all the different programs. But if you could just kind of provide almost like a quick little overview of the campus and the various things that are there, like physically, maybe that will help people understand kind of the scope. And then also maybe even a part of that is if you could talk again just about the campus and how it got started and how it's grown and blossomed and developed over time as well.
Okay, so first of all, the campus itself, we have an outdoor pavilion that has 8 courts. We have tennis, basketball, pickleball. Actually, the grand opening is right before COVID hit, so it's only a few years old. And then we have, leased to us on the site, is Tree Runner Adventure Park. And that's here with zip lines, and they've got advanced down to children's courses. So we have zip line and rope climbing, and that's a wonderful place. On our campus, past that, we have the swimming pool, a beautiful outdoor swimming pool that is open from May to September. We have the main building here with 3 separate areas to have a luncheon or where the book club or mahjong could play. We have a beautiful lake out front with a deck where you can sit and just read a book if you want. It's gorgeous, and members fish. You throw back the fish, but members come and fish. We have the docks. We have a gorgeous walk around the lake, so you can go on a hike around. The campus is gorgeous, and we have, I think it was 30 acres, and we haven't developed a good amount of it. We have huge soccer fields here that are very popular, even to rent. A lot of the city leagues play out here. So we have a lot of space and a lot of outdoor events going on. So it's a beautiful, beautiful campus. The campus, I think in the 70s it was. Now, like I said, I'm only 7 years here, but was purchased. It was a boys' club originally. And the building has now been refinished. Actually, when I came here, it just opened. I worked for a couple months in a trailer during construction, and then we moved right into the building. So the building is fairly new also. And it was a boys' club, and then it started. We were a J without walls, and then we have walls, and it's been there's a constant raising money to add buildings, and the pavilion was a big undertaking. So it's got a lot of potential. There's a whole plan of more things to come.
And it's also very interesting because, again, the JCC and the Con campus is a real focal point and sort of grounding for the Jewish community here in Wake County. And it's also important because I don't know if you, our listeners, are aware, but the importance of place in Judaism. In other words, one of the sacred names for God is Hamakom, the place. How do you kind of describe again that sense of place and its role in terms of providing again sort of a focal point and a gathering place for the Jewish community?
Well, and one of the things I left out too was PJ Library, which is for young children to get, to come to the campus, and we have playgrounds. We have huge playgrounds here. One that's for ages 5 and up, and one that's for young kids. So I agree, it is a place for everyone. And I guess emotionally, I feel like it's home. It's you can always come to a JCC. You can always be connected. You can always find people that you have a real deep connection with. And whenever you come to a town, I would tell anybody in the whole world, contact your JCC, because it is a place for you. It is a comfortable, whether you're Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, it doesn't matter. It's for everyone. This isn't a religious place. It is for Jewish culture. It is for like-minded people. It's a place where you fit in, no matter who you are, where you came from, what you have to offer. You always fit in at a J. There's somebody you can connect with. And I love it.
That's wonderful. And if people actually aren't members, but they still want to come and participate in some of these programs, then they can do that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Everyone's welcome here. There are, the Federation is the umbrella organization over the JCC, over JCRC, the Council for Relations, and JFS, which is huge, that's the service organization. So everybody can be part in some way of something. You can join the JCC. You don't have to. You can still come. And things you have to be a member of, or for the pool, or some events, but no, you come. It doesn't matter. And if someone isn't able to afford it, that doesn't matter. We work with everyone. So there's something, like I said, from birth to the end, there's something for everyone.
That's great. Just to kind of wrap things up, how has your working with the Jewish community, and especially your working with newcomers, how has it either changed the way that you do things or given you, again, a new sense of appreciation for the Jewish community here in Raleigh?
I honestly don't know what I would have done without them. I don't. I got to meet so many wonderful people. I got to change people's lives, which is selfishly the most wonderful thing someone could do. When people move here and they're scared, or I'll talk to someone on the phone and they'll say, we're thinking about moving to Raleigh. What do you think? And I give from my heart my spiel, and they're like, oh my God, we're excited. We want to move now. We're putting the house on the market. I can't tell you personally how rewarding this job has been. And like I said, as a newcomer here, I really honestly don't know how people do it if they move here and they don't contact the JCC, because it's your instant in. You're there. You come here, you have friends, you have things to do. So this is great. Where you want to be.
Leslie Needham, thank you so much for taking time and talking with me today. And again, your enthusiasm and your passion is obvious, and it's wonderful. We just hope that more people will contact the J.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you so much. It is my passion, so thank you.
Thank you for listening to Shalom Greater Raleigh. The show is hosted and edited by yours truly, BJ Davis. The show's producer is Jory Slodky. The title graphic was created by Eileen Millott, and the Federation's CEO is Phil Brodsky. Also, a big shout out to Raleigh Jewish music phenomenon Dan Nichols for the generous use of his music. We'd also like to thank our sponsors BizCom Global and Campbell Orthodontics. The content of this program was accurate as of the day it was recorded. For up-to-date information about programs, visit shalomraleigh.org. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We welcome your questions, suggestions, and comments, so send us an email at info@shalomraleigh.org. That's info@shalomraleigh.org. Shalom Greater Raleigh is a production of the Jewish Federation of Greater Raleigh.